Over the last year, I've accumulated a bunch of gear that helps me stream my music production sessions to twitch.tv or YouTube. And it used to look like this. And now it looks like this within a year. It's not flashy, and I don't want it to be because I like minimalism, but getting your audio into a stream is kind of hard when you're also trying to do it with a low latency. Because if you're trying to make music, any delay between the signal you're making with your voice or your guitar or whatever and the playback to your ears is going to get really confusing to your brain. So you want to get that latency as low as possible, which is a problem because of audio drivers. You've probably figured this out if you're here. Apple users don't really have this problem. They have other problems though, so I'm really focusing on PC users. I'll be going over a lot of options. You have to get your audio from your digital audio workstation into a streaming software. All these options come with their own price, their own pros, and their own cons, and I'll be briefly going over all of them, but that still means it's going to be quite a bit of a video, and there's a lot of different topics that I'll be talking about, so there's timestamps, so you can kind of skip around the video if you want to. I believe the whole thing is going to be interesting and would provide some inspiration for how you want to do this. Of course, I am not able to test all of this. I only have my own budget and I am one guy, so I'm just telling you about my experiences here and what I've learned. I've tested a lot of stuff for me and I have some pretty high standards and I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So you can trust me on that type of stuff that I know what I'm doing nowadays. Hey, it's me from the future. I'm editing the video and it's taking up a lot of time, so I thought this would be a great place for my sponsor spot, which is me. I'm putting a lot of time and effort into this stuff and I'm getting nothing in return. Rather, I'm spending all the money I don't have buying stuff to make this thing. So if you want to support me, you can go to my Spotify or my Apple Music or whatever. It's called a master's archive and it's got like 800, almost 900 songs on there. So if you could put it on shuffle for like a night or 2 nights or like a month, I don't know, and put it on mute because not all of it's very good. That actually does help. I've tried it with my lovely parents and it works. So that would make you Robin Hood because you would be stealing from the rich. It's not stealing, actually. You would be taking from the rich and giving it to the poor, which is me. And that'd be great. And it works. So please do that. Or you could donate, whatever. I don't care. But just consider that and on with the video. With that said, I think we can get into it by starting with my criteria. You kick the ball. Shake. I got myself an Americano, a fake one, mind you, because it's got a crema, which it shouldn't have, made with Italian espresso and a bunch of hot water. And the ratio is a bit off, but I kind of wing it, so it's just a watered down espresso. So let's talk about criteria. What I want for my stream is, number one, it to be non-intrusive to my workflow. That's very important to me. I stream long sessions and I don't really want the stream to bother me while I'm in the flow. And I'm actually going to change this a little bit from what I learned from the book Deep Work by, I think, Cal Newport. I haven't really been reading it very often, but every time I open up the book and read a bit, I'm like, oh, I really should take care of this non-intrusive stream a little bit more. And I suggest you read the book. I suggest you also give this priority in your streaming, because if you want to be productive and the stream is super intrusive, that's going to be annoying. Of course, your mileage may vary. You might just be doing this for fun. Then by all means, get distracted. But if you want to do actually good music work, getting those intrusions can be a little annoying, so find a way to make it non-intrusive for yourself. I made it very stable for 12 hours on end, and I don't really have to look at the stream at all. I could just set it and forget it, and I'm streaming. So that's what I like. I want it to be even more non-intrusive in the future. I want it to be easy to set up. I don't want to spend an entire Sunday to set up my stream with the lights and stands and all that stuff, just to stream on Monday. So I want to have it done in max a half an hour, but preferably no setup at all. I just want it to be there at all times whenever I want to stream, which is kind of annoying because then the streaming setup kind of gets in the way as well. But I want it to be really easy to set up. I also want it to be high quality and low latency audio. I don't want my mouth to get desynced from my stream, so that when I'm talking and the audio runs wild, I don't want that. I also want it to sound really good. I want to have a good microphone in the stream, so it's pleasant to listen to. I want to have good video quality, obviously, so people can actually look at something that looks nice. I want to have quiet operation of the streaming setup. I don't want it to make any noise, which I'll go over in a little bit, because if you're streaming with things like a MacBook, that is not quiet operation. Now I have a fanless separate system, so it makes no noise when I'm streaming, and that is a godsend. Quiet operation is very nice, especially if you're doing things with your microphone. It's going to pick up a lot of noise. You don't want that. Stability, I want it to be stable for 12 hours on end, without me really looking at it. So if things are battery powered, I have to find a way to make it not battery powered, get it on an AC wall wart, and it needs to be comfortable. I need to sit in this space for 12 hours on end if I'm doing a full 12-hour stream. It needs to be chill. I don't really want to, think about it too much, I want it to, still be my studio. So it needs to be comfortable. And I haven't really had much issues with that, but, it needs to be chill. So the microphones need to hang away from my face. I don't want to have stuff on my face while I'm streaming. I tried that. It wasn't good. So yeah, I want to have it nice. Good headphones, or get the speakers without any crosstalk on the microphone. There's a bunch of problems that present itself there, but yeah, comfortability is a big issue, especially 12 hours. I need to get a better chair, by the way. So the criteria grew over the course of the year that I've been streaming, and keep in mind that I accumulated all the gear over the course of a year and a little bit more. So all the stuff that you see me using, I've accumulated with a lot of that. I'm a pretty stingy guy, except when it comes to music production gear. So, I spent most of my money on this stuff. So if you don't do that, don't expect, the same stuff. For context, I want to go over how my stream has evolved, so we can all understand how this thing grew and why I made certain decisions and how I learned certain things that I hopefully can teach you now. Because at the start it looked really bad, but I went for it, and it wasn't very good. But now now we're here. Started from the bottom, now we're still kind of at the bottom, but it looks better. I started streaming on the 11th of February 2019, and I was doing 12-hour sessions of music before that, and I wanted to stream it. I didn't really have anything to do it with, though, but I had a loaner MacBook from the school I was teaching at, and I pointed it at my face, and that was pretty much it. Oh, I also had another webcam that I switched between every minute or something, so you could just see my face. You can really see my DAW. And I don't really understand how I was okay with doing that for 12 hours on end, 5 times. After 5 sessions, I migrated to twitch.tv from YouTube. And I streamed on Twitch before, namely Borderlands 2, and I amassed a little bit of a following when I streamed Borderlands, but that didn't actually help me grow at all on Twitch with music, because people that watch Borderlands apparently don't really want to watch me make music, alas. Eventually, I rearranged my studio space, got rid of my bed, or I relocated my bed, I think, and it looked a lot nicer, much better corner of the room.
This is how people dance in the future, with their shoulders and their hands like this.
And it was just better. But I still had my condenser microphone pretty far from my face, but it was hooked up to an audio interface, which was hooked up to my MacBook, so it did sound quite a bit better. Yeah, music was still really weird though. Eventually, a miracle happened. I was able to get my screen from my computer to my MacBook over Ethernet using NDI, which, wow, what a technology, honestly. I'll be talking about that later. And I was able to get my screen on Twitch with my voice, and everything was good. And everything was actually pretty good. But then new problems started arising, like how incredibly loud the MacBook is when you stream with it, because the fan starts spinning up and it sounds like a Boeing taking off.
This is me, just speaking relatively normally, slightly away from the microphone, and the thing is pretty close to the MacBook, but it's pretty loud. I maxed the CPU by running a couple instances of Yes in the terminal, but yeah, it's pretty loud.
So that was the new problem that I had to fix. Everything was pretty good, but now there was this new problem of not having quiet operation. So I fixed that by getting a separate system, which is like underneath here, out of frame, and I made it fanless, so it makes no noise. I'll be talking about that system. Makes no noise. Also definitely noticeable how a laptop that's not taking off in terms of, you know, ventilation is very nice. And that is fantastic, but it made a little bit of noise with its PSU over all the signals. Except now I still have these other weird noises, but, you know, it's good. It's nice, very good. So I had to put two direct in DI boxes in between the signal. It was a lot of annoying routing, but now I have quiet operation. The only fan stuff that you can hear is my PC, my workstation PC, which is relatively quiet when I'm doing music production. And that's good, and it works, and that's where I'm at right now. In my experience, when you're trying to stream your music to Twitch, there's really two options, which is software routing and hardware routing. And hardware routing, with that I mean having a separate system to stream your session to Twitch. So you have two separate computers doing the work there. And you can probably guess that one of them is much cheaper than the other. As virtual cables can be free, and separate systems very much are not free. But I'll tell you about both. They have their pros and cons. I'll start with the virtual cables. So let's look at audio drivers, because that's really where the main problem lies here. When we're doing music production, we are using ASIO drivers, ASIO drivers, because they are made for making music. They are very low latency and high quality and very nice, but they achieve the low latency by foregoing any communication with the Windows sound. So your sound on your computer that you can press the button and the sound goes up or down, that doesn't work on ASIO drivers. And so there's no communication there, which is a problem because then other applications can't actually listen to your DAW. And which is a problem because OBS is another application that wants to listen to Ableton to stream its audio, but it can't because it's using an ASIO driver. Problematic. There's a couple options that you have. The easiest one is probably to check out the FL Studio ASIO driver. So I don't really know how you get it. I got it some time ago, and apparently it's really quite good. And it gets you to around 100 millisecond latency, which is workable, I suppose. Pretty much unacceptable for me. But if you're okay with like 100 milliseconds, that's fine. You can also look at this thing called Voicemeeter Banana, which is donationware, and it is a virtual cable, and there's a bunch of tutorials online about Voicemeeter Banana, and you can get it to about 35 milliseconds of latency, which is really quite low, but not low enough for me. And I got a lot of crackling with it as well, some other problems. It's good software. It's good stuff, and it's donationware, so it's free if you don't want to pay. So you can definitely try that out. And a heads up from the editor, it's me. It also kind of messes with your system sounds. So if you're like using Discord or anything, it's gonna select Voicemeeter and it's gonna switch around with drivers kind of often, which is kind of annoying. I don't like that, but you know, if you don't mind that, use Voicemeeter Banana. It's still pretty good. That's a good option. So if you want to go the software route, try Voicemeeter Banana, but first try the FL Studio ASIO driver. You can install it on Ableton as well. It's kind of DAW agnostic. You can install it and use it. So have a look at that. There's also kind of an in-between option, which involves these types of things, which are audio interfaces. And this is a relatively expensive, big one. Well, it's not super expensive, but it's relatively big. What you do is you can route your audio from an output back into an input. And if you route it to the first two inputs, then OBS will see it as the left and right channel. So as you guess, that actually works. But you can also maybe imagine feedback loops happening. If you are routing your inputs directly into the same outputs that you are routing into the inputs again, then you get a feedback loop, which your ears are not going to like, and the system is also not going to like. More of a problem than that is this thing called phantom power. And I'm kind of assuming you know what phantom power is at this point, but phantom power destroys audio interfaces if you route it to an output. And I know this because I've done it twice. I've destroyed 2 audio interfaces with phantom power, so be very careful when you do stuff like this. You can also do it with 2 interfaces, have one like input interface and one output interface, and then route them into each other. You can totally do that as well. Works. I've seen people do it. I have not done it myself because I'm afraid I'm going to break them. There's an option of getting DI boxes in there, which have a transformer in them, and it changes the electric signal into a magnetic signal, and then it changes the magnetic signal back into an electric signal. And phantom power can't actually be converted into a magnetic signal that way, so it blocks phantom power. So if you put that between the output and the input, that should block the phantom power. But there might be some other problems arising with that. I just don't really recommend it unless you really know what you're doing and if you have no other options. But people have done it successfully, so that's a possibility. And you can get really low latencies with that. You can get to the 20 milliseconds with that. So, you know, it's a good option. Relatively inexpensive. You can get some inexpensive audio interfaces to do this. And now we get to the dedicated streaming system, which is what I chose to do, and it's really fun and very rewarding and very expensive. And the main thing you're getting is, to me, stability and good quality, low latency on your own computer, and it offloads some of the processing power that your computer needs to stream. So you can just output the video from the screens without really processing it, put it in another computer, and that does all the processing of that. So it offloads some of the resources, which is good, and gamers use this mainly to get higher FPS. I use this mainly so I can get my CPU, give it a break, and keep it a little bit cooler and have the fans not spin up on my computer as well. Many different reasons to do this. Hard to justify the cost, but you know, I'm a nerd. I wanted this, so my brain will just justify the cost immediately for me, which is kind of a cool thing my brain does. To get your sound from one system to the other, you're going to need two audio interfaces, which can be quite cheap. It doesn't really matter what kind of interface you use. You can get the UMC 22 something from Behringer. They should work. They have a little bit of noise on the preamps, in my experience. But you can route one of these boys into another one of these boys, but you know, smaller. And one is connected to your main PC, and another is connected to your other PC. I was doing a video, but that's okay.
Food.
Thanks.
Counterfeit.
Yes. As I was saying, we got one of your audio interfaces, and you route it to another audio interface. And they work through USB, so that's relatively plug and play. That works fine. OBS can just see the audio interface. Oh, make sure that all the audio that you want to stream, so if you have a separate microphone that you're routing weirdly through your interface, it all ends up at input 1 and 2 of the audio interface that you're using in your streaming setup, because it's only going to see input 1 and 2 as the left and right channels, because audio interfaces, they output balanced mono. So you need a separate cable for left and right. So you can't do stereo. If you're going to try and do stereo and put it in a balanced input, it's not going to actually hear anything because of polarity issues. Check balanced cables stuff, how they work, because that's going to teach you quite some interesting information. Yeah, it's King's Day here, so we're partying. Even though it's all quarantined in here, but you know, food. Now, getting video from one system to the other is a little bit more involved. I have two separate video sources, which is the camera you're looking through, and my screens, which I'm streaming to my computer. Now, the camera is the relatively simple setup. I'm using an Elgato Camlink 4K. It doesn't really need to be 4K because I don't stream 4K webcam stuff, but an Elgato Camlink 4K, which I plug into my computer. It doesn't like USB hubs, so I have to plug it directly into the motherboard, and it grabs the HDMI signal from the camera and puts it into the computer, and it sees it as a webcam. So that works quite well. They are pricey though, and there are cheaper alternatives to be found on Amazon. Check out YouTube, check out HDMI grabbers, and you'll find that stuff for like a third of the price. I wish I knew that before I bought an Elgato Camlink, honestly. But it works. It doesn't really work very well with a MacBook. It gets a little buggy, but it will work if you just unplug and plug it in like 50 times. It will eventually work. And that's quite nice. The reason I'm using a DSLR is just because it looks so much better than a webcam. And while webcams are getting kind of expensive and pretty good, it's still nowhere near the quality a DSLR can put out. So that's why I got a DSLR. The second video stream is a little harder to get into a computer, into another computer, which is the screens. And it uses NDI, which is a protocol that people use in a pretty professional industry to get screens over Ethernet. So you can output the video of two screens and output it over Ethernet. So you can actually get an Ethernet switcher and just plug 2 computers in it, and the other computer can see the signal from this computer, which is really nice, and it works incredibly well. And OBS has a plugin aptly named OBS NDI, and you can search for it on Google. You can find it easily, and you can install it, and then it can output NDI stuff. And it when you download that plugin, it automatically also installs NDI system stuff on your PC, so it always works really nicely. Relatively plug and play, and then you could just output your screens to another PC, and it just sees that as a webcam, and it is fantastic. It works so well. Now, as you can see, I'm using 2 screens, right? And it switches, actually, let me just... It switches between 2 scenes automatically when my mouse hovers over one screen or the other, which is really nice, and it's called Advanced Scene Switcher. I'm not going to show you how that works because that's a kind of a different topic, but that's really nice. I like having 2 screens. And that's what it looks like. Streamlabs OBS is a very nice streaming service as well. And it can receive NDI, it cannot send NDI. So I'm using that on my receiving end. I'm using Streamlabs OBS. And on my sending end, I'm using OBS Studio, which works very nice. One thing to take into account if you're using a DSLR is that it can output HDMI, but not just an HDMI, clean HDMI, which a lot of cameras actually do, but you can't really see it in the spec sheet often. Which is annoying, so it's really hard to see if the camera can actually output clean HDMI. There is a list by Elgato Camlink on their website that states cameras that work, but it's definitely not the full list. There are many more cameras that work, but at least the Lumix G7, G85, and just the Panasonic cameras, they work. I'm using a G85 right now, and I will get a G7 for my streaming setup to put up there permanently. And that works really, really nicely. So get a clean HDMI output. Let me quickly go over system specifications of a streaming system, because it doesn't really need much, but you do want it to be stable, and you want it to be quiet as well. And I'll show you what I have, but what I think are good minimum specifications is a Core i5 processor or similar, like a Ryzen 3, I believe as well would be good. I haven't really looked into Ryzen, heard good things about it, but something like a Core i5 or Core i7 should be good. A relatively newer generation is going to be fine for that. I have a Core i7, and it's at 22% CPU usage when I'm streaming, so that's way overhead, but it's good to have that overhead. Enough USB ports for getting your input from your video, so an Elgato Camlink or whatever you're using, and your keyboard and mouse type of deal. If you're using Bluetooth, it's usually just one little dongle or no dongle at all, but then you need to have a motherboard that has Bluetooth enabled. You also need one for the audio interface, so a USB for the audio interface. And at least one Ethernet port so you can connect it to the Ethernet switch for the NDI stream, and some kind of monitor, something that you can actually see what you're doing on the system for. Now I have 2 screens, so I could actually connect my Seperate system to one of these screens and switch on the screen. I really don't like that. It's involved. It breaks my immersion and my flow. So I got a loaner screen from my housemate that just brought me my food, but he took it back, so I'm gonna have to get myself another screen, but they're like less than $100, especially if you get them secondhand. So it's not, you don't need much, just 1080p, small little monitor should do. Now, lucky for us, music production streams are very easy to compress. There's no real moving things, right? If you're also going to be playing games, then this story is a little bit of a different thing. But the music production streams are very easy to stream because there's no moving pixels or very little moving pixels. So the encoder has very little work to do, especially on Ableton, because it's flat colors as well. Super easy to compress. So you can actually stream 1440p with a pretty low bit rate. And your audio is not really going to suffer from that, I don't believe. And the video is going to look fine. It might look a little pixelated, but you can do pretty high pixel count streams and it should look fine with low bitrate. So you don't even need that high of an internet to stream 1080p 30 FPS. And I don't recommend going higher than 30 FPS. You can go to 60, but it really doesn't add that much more, and you're just using way more bandwidth. And actually people wanting to watch your stream are going to have a harder time because of the higher bandwidth that it takes for them to actually watch it as well. So take that into account. You don't need much in terms of bitrate. So you can kind of experiment, get it low, and it should still work fine. Now I mentioned my MacBook, which is a 2016 MacBook Pro, which had the touch bar, one of the first ones with the touch bar, and it is really nice. It's a loaner. I'm actually using it to check my script here. I'm going off script a lot, but like right now. But it's really good stuff, and it's really expensive stuff as well. And it's really nice for any kind of work you're doing with text editing and the kind of video stuff as well. But the problem with it is the fans. My God, do they get loud. I mean, I probably have a very low tolerance for loud fans, but Jesus, it's not okay. And it is just oppressive. Whenever I stop the stream and the fans go off again, it feels like a load off my shoulders. It's just such an oppressive sound. And if you're sitting in that sound for, an extended amount of time, it gets really tiring for your ears as well. It's just, my God. And if you're doing music, not good. Which is really why I recommend getting a very silent system, or fanless even, which is what I have. I have a fanless system because, man, it's no good. It's no bueno.
Part of potential. This part of potential. This part of potential.
To show you what one of these systems can look like, I'll show you mine so you get a little bit of an idea what it could be. I'm not saying this is perfect. Inspiration. My workstation PC is underneath my desk, and it is a self-built PC. It's not a power monster. It's not a gaming rig by any means. It does have a graphics card in it, but I hardly play any games on it. It's got an i7 CPU unlocked, so you could overclock it, but I don't. It's in a pretty small case. It's water-cooled. It's pretty nice. I replaced the fans lately, and now the only noise it makes is the hard drives, and it's still too loud for me. So I'm going to be replacing everything with SSDs. I already have 3 terabytes of SSD in there with an M.2 drive of 2 terabytes from Intel, which is an amazing piece of tech, honestly. And that's just because I have a lot of samples and a lot of 4K footage. That takes up a lot of space. So that's my computer. My dedicated streaming PC is an Intel NUC, actually, which is the NUC 8i7BEK, which has an i7 processor in there. And I put it in an Akasa, let me check, Plato, Akasa Plato X8 case, which is a fanless enclosure that mounts directly to the CPU of the Intel NUC, which is really nice because then it has no moving parts and it's completely silent, and it's really weird to start up a silent PC. You press the button, nothing happens, you just see a light come on. It makes no sound. It's fantastic. Fantastic. I like using 2 monitors for my music production, so I have both screens with Ableton on them, and I'm using advanced scene switcher in OBS to, track my mouse and then change the monitor that's being streamed to my streaming PC, and that works really, really quite wonderfully. And I'm outputting over Ethernet, so I need a switcher, which is just a very cheap little Ethernet switcher, 10 gigabit. You can buy those anywhere, like $30. And I just plugged my computer in there and my streaming PC. And you would think that there's an Ethernet cable just running to my modem, just to the internet, but actually it's running to a mesh network thing. So it's actually streaming over Wi-Fi, but my Wi-Fi is somehow more stable and faster than an Ethernet cable going to my modem, so this is what I'm going with. And this works really, really well. I highly suggest anyone look at mesh networks. They're relatively inexpensive now, and they are fantastic for in the house. It's amazing. No trouble with Wi-Fi anymore, ever. So that's the video of the DAW to my system over Ethernet. The audio goes through this Scarlett 18i20, which has enough inputs and outputs for most people. I still don't really have enough inputs, so I'm going to expand it, but it's really nice. You can internally route all your audio. So these two inputs, actually the first one on this cable here, black cable, is my microphone that I usually use for streaming, and it's going automatically to the outputs into the stream. So it's mixing both the DAW sound and this microphone immediately into one signal, which goes to the streaming setup, which is really nice because then I don't have to mix them down in another way. It's mixed inside the box here, so that's quite nice. And this can be done, I think, from the 8i6 upwards from Focusrite. And this is a reason I really like Focusrite. Their software is really good. You can mix inside the software and it's amazing, which is what I really recommend people. If they want to get that stuff, get a Focusrite. It works amazingly. That's being output to two DIs in between, actually, because there was some switching noise from the PSU from my streaming setup. So the DI kind of isolates that sound and break up any ground loop that I have. And it goes into the input, the first two inputs of my second audio interface. Speaking of microphones, I am using an Octava MK1201, I believe, which, let me just get that, which is this, and it's on this arm, and I had to use the clamp, so it's not attached to my desk right now, but it's this thing, and it's a little overhead microphone. It's a super cardioid, so it doesn't get as much talk back from the speakers when it's pointed at my face, but not at the speakers. So I can actually use my monitors, my Yamahas, and not have an insane amount of feedback or bad audio while I'm making my music, which is great because I don't always want to have my headphones on. So the Octava is a really good option. It's relatively inexpensive. It's got a low pass filter if you want it, which is good for vibrations from anything like a desk. So if I'm moving this, I'm not getting a lot of vibrational noise from the desk going on. I will be upgrading this to a video mic NTG by Rode, and it will be alongside my camera, which is usually up top here, which is the, like I said, Lumix G85, which works really nice. And the camera is usually situated here, but of course not because I'm using it right now. And then the microphone will be right next to that, and that will probably work quite nicely. To get the camera to stream for 12 hours on an end, though, I need to have a dummy battery and HDMI output, obviously, but a dummy battery. And for pretty much every camera, I think you can find dummy batteries to power them via AC from the wall. And that's really nice. It uses USB charger things. And the G85 has a dummy battery for it you can find on Amazon. And it's relatively cheap. It's like $12. And it makes it so you can stream for however long you want. You can just turn it on and it doesn't ever go off, which is amazing. For streaming, I got OBS on my main computer and Streamlabs OBS on my Seperate system. And right now I don't actually have a separate monitor for it, but I'm going to get it again. And peripherals are kind of annoying, right? If you have two computers, you have two keyboards and two mice. But that problem is fixed with this set of peripherals, which is the Logitech Master Keys, MX Keys, and the Logitech MX Master 3. I think, yes, MX Master 3 and MX Keys. And these are Bluetooth keyboard and mouse. And if you're not a fan, I get it. If you're not a fan of Bluetooth keyboard and mice, I love them. No cables, it looks so clean. But these can actually switch between 3 different systems sort of seamlessly. So I could just use this keyboard and this mouse for both my systems, and even if I am getting an extra system like my MacBook involved, I can even switch to that, which is mind-blowing to me. It's amazing. I only need one set of peripherals, and they're relatively expensive, but that's worth it, man. I can compose a staccato. This setup grew as I went, and if I had to choose something from the start to just get going, I would have probably done it slightly differently. That's not how life works though, but I can give you some example setups that should work. And I'm going from cheap to more expensive, and each iteration builds on the previous setup. So example number 1, with a cheap webcam and software routing and a USB microphone probably. Because you can get a Logitech C270, I think, which is a 720p webcam. Looks kind of like trash. Mine recently broke after service of like 5 years, so that's not bad. And they are like $30. And 720p might sound bad, but you're gonna mash it in a corner of the screen anyway, so it's gonna be downscaled. And also, higher resolution webcams don't necessarily look any better. It's the glass, it's the sensor, they are shit. So just accept that a webcam kind of looks like shit. You're not really going to go much higher in quality anyway. So just get a really cheap one, and that should work. Then you can use Voicemeeter Banana to route your audio internally and get yourself a cheap USB microphone. I don't have one because I don't really like USB microphones because they act like their own audio interface, which kind of messes with my audio. But they're good. You can get a Yeti Blue a Blue Yeti or a Blue Snowball. Yeah, there we go. A Blue is the brand, and the microphone is called Yeti. It's quite expensive, or the Snowball, which is relatively inexpensive, and it sounds really quite nice. I've heard many people use it, and it's good. Everybody likes it, but it's USB, so you know, if you're using an audio interface, it's gonna be kind of annoying. But if you're using an audio interface, you probably already have microphones and XLR inputs and shit. Now for the second system, you can get 2 audio interfaces, or 1 and have more danger, and some XLR microphones. So it's basically the same setup, same webcam, but not the internal routing, so you can get your latency lower to like sub 30 milliseconds, which is to me the sweet spot. And we talked about this. You just get 2 audio interfaces. You can get really cheap ones like the UMC22 from Behringer. I think it's like $40 or something. I have one that I gave to someone to use to experiment with these learning vocals. So they're relatively inexpensive and pretty high quality, so you can go after that. If you want to get kind of fancy with it, you can get like the Octava MK12, which I just showed you. This, oh my god, this microphone, a nice little small condenser microphone, which is directional. Or if you don't mind having a microphone like this in your face the whole stream, you can get something like a Shure SM7B, which is quite expensive. but it sounds fantastic, and it's like a industry standard. Or you can get the Electro Voice RE20, which is a similar situation. Or you can get this thing, which is a Aston Stealth, which has actually preamps in it, which the SM7B does not have. So you're gonna have to boost the audio if you want anything useful out of it. And this one has 4 different preamps in it. It sounds really good. I like it a lot. It's a good microphone. It's just a unit of a boy, and you're gonna need to get yourself a nice shock mount to go with it. And there really only are 2 options, which is this one and a cheap Amazon one. So I got this one, which is not cheap. It's like $60 for a mount, but you know, it's worth it. I like it a lot. Then the next step up is getting a camera like this on top of your screens or wherever you want it, which is going to bump the price up quite rapidly, because you're going to have to get a camera which starts at about $200 for a relatively cheap one that can output clean HDMI. And you could look at the Canon EOS M, I believe, and I haven't checked if it has clean output, but I was doing some forum digging and I think it does. I might actually get one myself because it's really small, but I'm probably going to go with the Lumix G7 because it's got the same color signs as the camera I'm using right now for making videos. That's just a much better workflow. But you can get a relatively cheap camera with interchangeable lenses. Get the ones with interchangeable lenses because they usually can output HDMI, and then you can actually get different lenses and they look so much better. So get that. But you're going to need something like a cam link or an HDMI grabber from Amazon, which is like $60 for a cheap one, I think. And you'd think you'd be done with that, because, well, we can wrap up with an XLR microphone as well on this one, but we talked about that. But you think you'd be done. I got a nice camera, but if you want to get good video, you're not done with having a good camera. The camera is, once you get relatively good quality, you're not going to get so much better quality if you just spend more money on it. A good sensor is a relatively good sensor, especially for things like streams and YouTube. You don't need that high quality of a sensor in your camera. What you need is good lighting. So right now I'm using a LED panel with a softbox attached to it, which is on a light stand. It's actually a speaker stand, but it's on a light stand, and that costs about $130 for a big LED panel. It's not huge, but it's big enough, and I've been using this for all my videos as well, and it's serving me well. I'm going to get a bigger one with more light output just because I want that, and it's going to be a little bit more professional. But you can get a relatively inexpensive LED panel, and I do recommend getting an LED panel for this because they're relatively inexpensive and very easy to use, very small, easy to set up, very light. And I recommend, I have this one. It's the Falcon Eyes RX12. Yeah, RX12T. Man, I didn't even need to read my script. I'm amazing. And it has served me well. But lighting is really what gets important. If you have a relatively good sensor on your camera, then it's all about lighting at that point. Now for the fourth setup is getting a separate system, which is where it gets really expensive. Yeah, what you're going to need for this is obviously a second system, which is going to cost you anywhere between $500 and $1,000, kind of depending on what you want. But I really do recommend you get a nice and stable system, which is probably going to cost you at least $500. Mine with the i7 in there, so you can downscale that a little bit, and in the fanless enclosure was, I think, about $800 in total, which to me is a good deal. But I can imagine that that's expensive for a lot of people. You can get, you need 2 audio interfaces. We talked about that. Cables to run your audio, obviously, and you can go very expensive with that, but I don't recommend it. Just get cables that work. Get your Ethernet switch, stupidly cheap nowadays. Get your monitor that you can probably find for less than $100. and your input devices, keyboard, mouse. But I got these two, which I love, the MX Keys and Master 3. And you need time and patience because you need to probably build the PC, or you get a Mac Mini, by the way. And you need to set up that stuff. You need to install Streamlabs OBS. You need to, let everything talk to each other, get the cables routed properly, figure out how NDI works. It's rewarding, but it does require some time and patience. And this is where the stuff gets confusing because you're working with two boxes here and it gets big. So if you want simplicity and if you think simplicity is key, this stuff is not key. It's not simple, but it is fun to me and it's good and it works really well. And the last example setup is what I call a fancy schmancy setup, which involves multiple cameras, really good audio. So you can get a couple of these cameras or some smaller ones, maybe like GoPro stuff. I don't really like the way they look though, but I would get a couple of this type of camera and connect them to something called an ATEM Mini, which is like $350 for a switcher that does 4 HDMI signals, outputs it as a webcam signal. It got 2 microphone inputs and you can switch with hardware buttons on the device, and it's amazing, and I'm probably gonna get it. And you get a really nice shotgun microphone maybe to do the voice really nicely, maybe get multiple so you can get a wide spread to still pick up audio even if you're moving around. Acoustic treatment, you can get that going. You can go pretty much all out with that, but at some point, multiple cameras, you're at a pro level there, so you're basically done there, which is what I'm going to be doing, because money, I have it, so I'll spend it. Now lastly, I want to share some considerations before you embark on this kind of journey, and before you end up in a similar situation as me. If you're a perfectionist, this stuff will cost you money, a lot of it. I am a perfectionist, which I've recently accepted, and yeah, all this stuff around me has cost me a couple €1,000 now, and I don't mind that because I really like doing this. But if you don't want that, then don't do this. The streaming community, this is the second consideration, the streaming community for music is oversaturated and underwatched. So you can stream for a year and not really get any viewers. I mean, I am not very good at marketing. I know I'm not doing my marketing correctly, or at all for that matter, and I should. But it's not easy to get into music production streams. People are not really watching that stuff. Only from well-known artists, and in twitch.tv there's music streams, just 24-hour radio streams, and DJs, and all the producers are really low in the ranking there. So it's really hard to get any viewership on Twitch for it. So be prepared for a challenge, or if you're just doing it for fun, keep doing it for fun. But if you're wanting to do this for a reason and get lots of viewers, be prepared for a challenge. And lastly, have fun with it, because there's nothing else to do. Have fun, and if it ain't fun, if you feel forced somehow, don't do it. Long story short, yeah. Hey, it's me again, Editor John from the future. I just wanted to thank you if you've come to the end of the video for watching this thing, or maybe you skipped around. That's kind of what these videos are for. And again, if you would like to support me, you can go to my Spotify account or my Apple Music and then listen to some of that music, or put it on mute. Just give me the streams. That'd be great. It works well. And I hope you had, some inspiration from this video. If you didn't, too bad. That's an hour wasted. And if you did, please tell me, or tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like, tell me how I could improve the information in this video. Not that I'm going to change it, but I might make another video which is 2 times as long sometime. If you like it, like the video. You know how YouTube works. There's some buttons to press. If you don't know how YouTube works, what are you even doing here? You're not supposed... How did you get here? Odd. So, peace out. Peace out? Is that what the cool kids say? Do I need to put a disclaimer here?
It's cold. God.